Getting comfortable? Yep, plenty of room. That's the sound of an owl, isn't it? An owl that lives right here in Wellesley. But if you woke up in the middle of the night and you heard that outside your bedroom window or in the cemetery next door, what kind of an owl is it? A great horned owl, very good. And how old are you? 7. Okay, if a 7-year-old knows that that's a great horned owl, the rest of us ought to too. My name is Marcia Wilson. I'm here with my husband, Mark Wilson, and this is the 5th year, I think in a row, that the library has been nice enough to sponsor our program. Thank all of you for coming out in the messy weather. And we are going to have some fun with owls here tonight. I'm just curious, how many of you have seen us here before? Anybody? Oh, okay, a lot of repeats. Good. Well, no two shows are ever the same. And you probably remember, and those of you who haven't seen us, we're going to start by reading Owl Babies. Who knows Owl Babies? You know Owl Babies? Yeah, and you're going to help us read it in a special part. And even the adults can join in. And then after we finish reading Owl Babies, I'll start to bring the owls out one by one or two by two. And tonight we brought 6 owls. And of course we'll talk about them, and I'll walk across the front and down the center aisle. And then we're going to have hooting lessons to teach you what each of the kinds of owls sounds like. Because just like the little girl and her dad did in Owl Moon, do any of you know Owl Moon? Okay, yeah. They heard that back in the woods on a winter night. They bundled up. They headed out in the direction of the hooting. They copied the sound, and lo and behold, the owl answered them. Have any of you ever tried that? Did it work? Did the owl answer you? No? Okay, well, they have to be in the mood. So you can never be sure, but it's always worth a try. We'll take your questions and comments once we have the owls out. Okay, and Mark, you're going to be our book holder? Okay. Once there were 3 baby owls, Sarah and Percy and Bill. They lived in a hole in the trunk of a tree with their owl mother. The hole had leaves and twigs and owl feathers in it. It was their house. One night they woke up and their owl mother was gone. Where's Mommy? Asked Sarah. Oh my goodness, said Percy. I want my mommy, said Bill. There's little Bill there, and he's really worried, and he's going to keep saying, I want my mommy, isn't he? And when I come around to that part again, I'm going to point to you like this, and I want you to help me say, I want my mommy, said Bill. Okay, so let's just practice. You ready? Here we go. I want my mommy, said Bill. Okay. Yeah.
That was pretty good. A little subdued, but pretty good. What if we tried saying it with a whiny voice?
A whiny, well, it
I mean,
is
school vacation. Let's have some fun with it.
Yeah, okay.
So when Marcia gives you the signal, give me your best whine, adults included.
You ready?
Okay.
I want my mommy, said Bill. Okay, that's a little more like it. Well, the baby owl sat and thought, since all owls think a lot. I think she's gone hunting, said Sarah. To get us our food, said Percy. I want my mommy, said Bill. But their owl mother didn't come. And so the baby owls came out of their house and sat on the tree and waited. You see, they're holding wings. They can't fly. A big branch for Sarah, a small branch for Percy, and an old piece of ivy down there for Bill. She'll be back, said Sarah. Back soon, said Percy. I want my mommy, said Bill. Oh, but it was dark in the woods and they had to be brave for things moved all around them. She'll bring us mice and things that are nice, said Sarah. Oh, I suppose so, said Percy. I want my mommy, said Bill. Well, they sat and they thought, since all owls think alike, I think maybe we should all sit over on my branch, said Sarah. And so they did, all three together. Suppose she got lost, said Sarah, or a fox got her, said Percy. I want my mommy, said Bill. And so the baby owls closed their owl eyes and wished their owl mother would come. And she came. Soft and silent, she swooped through the trees all the way back to Sarah and Percy and Bill. There they are, little fluff balls. Mommy, Mommy, they cried, and they flapped and they danced and they bounced up and down on that branch. Who was the happiest of all to see her? Oh, little Bill, he almost jumped out of his feathers. But the mommy owl was glad to see them. Of course. What's all the fuss, their owl mother asked. You knew I'd be back. Well, sound familiar? The baby owl sat and thought, since all owls think alike. I knew it, said Sarah, and I knew it, said Percy. I love my mommy, said Bill. So of course she came back, bringing mice and things that are nice. Thank you, Mark. Let's thank Mark with a wing flap, okay? Because it's nice and quiet for the owls. Plus, it's fun to do. You ready to meet the owls? Yeah, slightly. All right, well, I'm going to be holding the owls with gloves, and they're not going to be flying around the room. You know, they're not our pets. We have to have a U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service license from the federal government and different state licenses. Here in Massachusetts, we have a state license from Massachusetts Wildlife. And right now, we have how many owls, Mark?
At last count, I think I saw 16.
Oh, you think you saw 16?
So tonight, you can think of us going out feeding them with a tray of about 45 mice. And you know, we feed them every night. Yeah. And here we are. They've eaten. What did we feed them last night? Yeah. What did they eat? Mice.
Mice, yeah.
Yeah.
Are they live?
They're not live. We buy them frozen.
We have big freezers full of mice.
Which I'm sure all of you do too, right? Yeah. So we thaw the mice. We go out with a tray of about 45, and then about 12 or 14 hours after the owl has eaten, this strange thing comes out of their mouth. They cough up something.
What is it? An
owl pellet. How many of you have taken apart an owl pellet? A few of you have, not too many.
Wow.
Well, for the uninitiated, an owl pellet contains all the bones and fur, or feathers if they ate a bird.
Wait a minute, here's one from the last program.
From the animal that they ate. And it comes out of the mouth, and a lot of kids take these apart in second, third, or fourth grade science classes. And there's a complete skeleton of a mouse in here. And you can recreate, you can rebuild the mouse, if you will, bone by bone. Yep. So if we're lucky, we might even see an owl cough up a pellet in front of you tonight.
Yeah.
That would be cool.
You never know. It has happened here. Now, I'm not going to be able to let you touch or hold the owls. I'll get you nice and close as I walk across the front and down the middle. And by the way, what are these gray mats taped to the floor for? Why did we put them there?
What do you think? Why are they down on the floor? What do you...
Like, you don't want us to be, like, too close to them.
Well, it's a good point. It shows you where you can sit.
Yeah.
But there's an even more important reason than that. What might the owl do on the mat?
Maybe scratch the mat?
No, not going to scratch the mat. What do you think they're going to do?
Poop on the mat?
Yeah, poop on the mat. Yeah.
You got it.
And I get to clean it up. So my job is called Whitewash Patrol. And I've got a squirt bottle, which is why I like this job, and a roll of paper towels.
Yeah.
So if you see whitewash on the mat and I haven't noticed it, you can just quietly point at it and I'll come over and clean it up, okay?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So let's give Mark a wing clap for the
Standing
work
by.
he's going to have to do.
Standing by.
All right. So we got both ends covered, the whitewash and the pellets. All right. Well, I'm going to start with the first two little owls that lived right here in Wellesley, maybe even in your own yard. The little
In fact, it's the most common owl in Wellesley. It's the eastern screech owl. And yet, few of us see them because they're nocturnal. And during the day, when they're sleeping, they're down in cavities and trees out of sight. So they're not often seen, they're more often heard. But it's the most common owl, certainly in Newton, Wellesley, in this area.
Yeah. And they live in people's yards.
They come in two colors. They come in this bark-colored gray. And they also come in a feisty, foxy red. And we happen to have both colors here tonight.
Yep, we do. And this is a feisty one, all right?
So these are not babies, these are full grown. And unfortunately, whoever named them called them screech owl. It's a terrible name. I've never heard one screech, although the one on the end here is complaining. I wouldn't call it a screech. Let's see what she has to say. Did we wake you up? You happy to be here? Would you rather go home?
Maybe she's ready for supper.
We've had many screech owls over the years, and this is the most vocal we've ever had.
Yeah.
I think she's a complainer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But she also blinks, you know, by the way, people think that owls can't blink, but just look at her. There you go. Anyway, we're going to have the hooting lesson now. Screech owls don't screech. Baby owls screech when they beg for food. Rather, the screech owls make a little neighing sound or whinnying sound. They go, who would like to come up and help us practice that call? I need a volunteer. How about right on the aisle there? Come on up.
Okay, you can stand right in front of Marcia, right there, and a little closer, and you can turn around and face the audience, and then back up about half a foot.
Because we're going to...
All right, we're going to surround you with screech owls. Hey, what's your name?
Hannah.
Okay, Hannah. I have to say, Hannah, you and the red screech owl have something in common.
and I didn't select you for that reason.
Hannah, you and the screech owl are the same colors.
Yeah, right.
Your hair is the same color as the screech owl.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
All right.
Anyway, so Hannah, Marcia will show you the call again, and you can try it, okay?
All right, wing flap.
Nice wing flap for Hannah.
Nice job.
Thanks for coming up. Nice job.
Even the red one gave her some wing flaps.
Yes.
Somebody had this little...
Can you just back up a little bit,
Back
buddy?
up a little bit.
Can you scooch back?
Because we don't want whitewash on those nice
Can you
boots.
scooch it back? We don't want to get them pooped on there yet.
Ah, there we go.
Perfect.
Okay.
Yeah, we haven't lost anybody ever to whitewash. We don't want it to happen tonight. So, although one time at 4th grade, an owl pooped on a girl's sneaker, and she was thrilled. She goes, I'll never wash that sneaker again. But the screech owls, they're easily missed. As I mentioned, they're nocturnal, so they eat a lot of rodents. They eat a lot of insects at night, like moths and crickets. And, you know, you don't have to be in the wilderness to see them. They're often in suburbs or even urban settings. You know, if you go into Boston, places like Mount Auburn Cemetery in Cambridge, or Arnold Arboretum in Boston, or Franklin Park, have screech owls. And certainly they're here in Wellesley and Newton and other surrounding towns in big numbers. And one of the reasons they're hard to find is they are on the menu for bigger owls. So they're good at hiding. They know that they're vulnerable. They could be taken by a Cooper's hawk or a great horned owl or a barred owl. And they don't like to sit exposed. Sometimes in the winter, like these days, when the days are getting longer and the sun's getting warmer, you'll see a screech owl teed up in a hole in a tree sunbathing with its eyes closed, looking a lot like bark. and you might drive right past it and never even notice it, but there are a fair number of screech owls sunbathing on days when the sun is out and it's nice and warm.
Hey, why not?
Yeah.
Yeah, hole in a tree, or how about a birdhouse?
Yep, a birdhouse like this is designed for screech owls. You can put one of these up in your yard, or two, because squirrels usually move into one of them. And a 4-inch hole, and you can get free plans online. You just Google screech owl box, nesting box, and these are well worth putting up. Only 6 pieces of wood, easy to build, or you can buy them all made. But either way, screech owls will use them. And they don't migrate. Screech owls are year-round residents, so you have them all year round.
What was your question?
Are they fluffy?
Are they fluffy? In places they're fluffy, but not the total owl. I mean, after all, we've got a full set of claws called talons, right? And then there's that beak that you can hardly see on the red one, but you can definitely see right down the throat of the gray one. Now, if they're eating something small enough, sometimes they'll swallow it whole. You know, if we give them one mouse, sometimes if it's small enough.
A tiny mouse?
Yeah, which end would they eat first, the head or the tail? The head, of course. It's the best part. Besides, the fur has to go down the right way, right? So it doesn't get caught.
So we came to these owls after a science project ended. There was a scientific study down in Maryland. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service was studying screech owls and kestrels to see if adult owls pass on resistance to certain diseases to their offspring. So they were studying West Nile virus, which is carried by mosquitoes. And these are offspring, and their parents did pass on resistance to West Nile virus, and then the study ended about 3 years ago, and then suddenly there were 86 screech owls that needed homes. So we just adopted 4 of them 6 months ago, and you can picture us driving up the New Jersey Turnpike in our van with 4 screech owls. But so they were part of that study, which has ended, and resistance is passed on, as well as sometimes the disease can be passed on to offspring. But luckily for humans, West Nile virus is not usually a serious disease, not usually.
Well, did you notice this red screech owl was looking straight over her back? Yeah.
Can any of you look straight over your back?
Now she just covered a full circle.
How far can you turn your head without moving your shoulders? How much of a circle? Half a circle. Oh, a quarter plus a quarter, you're right, half. You said a half the first. Well, an owl, looking straight ahead, can turn its head 3/4 of a circle in one direction, back to the front, and 3/4 in the other direction, for a total movement of a circle and a half. I bet no one else can do that here. But you know what you can do that an owl can't with its eyes? Turn them right. An owl is always looking straight ahead. You'll notice they can't roll their eyes up and down or left and right. So that's why they have the ability to turn so far left and right. They have extra bones that help them do that in their neck. Yeah. Any questions as we're moving along? Questions or comments? Anybody here seen a screech owl in the wild? Not too many hands. Okay. Question over here? How old are both of those owls, Marcia?
They're 3.5 years old, and we know from a blood test that they're both females.
It's pretty hard to tell just looking at an owl whether it's a male or female. So somehow they can tell, but for humans it's difficult.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean,
do
how
the
do
owls
they
have like their eyes? Do some like have them on the sides?
No. No owl has eyes on the sides. They're all on the front. So that's one of the ways you can tell if a bird is an owl.
Whoa.
Who's that from?
I don't know. One of the screech owls.
Okay.
Just missed my foot.
Okay.
Which one of them did it? The gray or the red? The red? Okay.
All right, I'm going to take another question, then I'll do the whitewash wipe up.
My aunt went to a place where there was lots of owls, and once my uncle gave me a book about owls.
Well, you got a very nice aunt uncle. Yeah. Well, I am going to wipe up this whitewash. We'll get to your question in a minute.
I've got on a bigger glove now for a bigger owl with bigger talons. And this is a barred owl, not a barn owl, but it's a barred owl. Gets its name from the bars, the pattern that runs across the upper part of his body. And these are stripes down here. They run up and down. See, each feather down there has a stripe on it. And right now, if you'll let me, I've got my finger in his right ear. It's right there, right behind the eye. Little ticklish there. And so, of course, birds' ear holes are right on the sides of their head, right there and right there. And if you look at owls, you'll notice that the eyes are right in the center of circles around their eyes called a facial disc. And those help the owl hear. And if you want to pretend that you're hearing like an owl, you can do this simple demonstration.
Take your hands, palms forward, and then cup them, and then just put them behind your ears. And suddenly you've increased your hearing because you can focus more sound into your ears, just like an owl does. And it's very directional hearing, and it helps them really locate little rodents rustling in the leaves very accurately. They can tell where something is. They can catch prey based on hearing alone.
Now, the barred owl sounds like a monkey. If you hear them, they go. How many of you have ever heard that? Maybe up north or somewhere here in Massachusetts. Who would like to come up and help us practice that call? Mark, would you like to
How about right
select
here?
somebody? Okay.
Come on up. So you can stand next to Marcia. Okay, and what's your name?
Alexandra.
Alexandra, have you ever heard a barred owl?
No.
Okay. Well, we do get them here. I don't know if they nest in Wellesley, but they might. And certainly they could show up here in the winter. So Alexandra, it's a cool call. If you think you're hearing monkeys out behind your house, it's a barred owl. And it's an 8-note call. And how does it go, Marcia?
Well, if you memorize the silly string of words, who cooks for you? Who cooks for you all? And you'll see that in a book or online if you look up B-A-R-R-E-D. It matches the notes. Who cooks for you? Who cooks for you all? So I'll do it again and you can do it, okay? Very good.
Well, you're not done yet, Alexandra.
Right. Sometimes they skip the first few notes and they just do the you-all part. They go, ooh-all.
Try that.
Ooh-all. All right. Nice job.
Give her a nice wing flap.
Yeah.
Awesome job. So sometimes they caterwaul. That's another call that you can hear. Or, and we won't do this one, they let out these blood-curdling shrieks. A lot of people think they're hearing a fisher in the woods when in fact they're hearing a barred owl shrieking. And it really sounds like something bad is happening in the woods when they do it. The first time you hear it, it's like, oh my goodness, what's going on in the woods there? Not good. But it's just a barred owl shrieking, and they do it all the time.
Yeah. And this is the only owl around us that has big what color eyes? Black or brown. They're dark brown. They're dark. And so they're a beautiful owl, and they don't have the little feather tufts up on top of the head like the screech owl. The screech owls had. So not all owls have those. And if I were to show you how deep the feathers are on his head and how fluffy and long they are on his body, they can't get away. And what if I told you his body underneath there isn't much bigger around than my arm? How many pounds do you think he weighs?
One.
What do you think in the blue?
Right.
How many pounds? 5.5 pounds? It's a great guess. It's totally reasonable, but it's way too much. What do you think? Half a pound. Okay, we have our range. It's more than half a pound and less than 5.5. What do you think? 3 is too much. So it's more than half, less than 3. More than half, less than 2. I feel like an auctioneer here.
1.
He's actually 1.5 pounds. Now at home, we do have a female, and she is 2 pounds. So in the world of owls, the raptors, owls, eagles, falcons, hawks, the females are bigger, stronger, heavier. And that's how sometimes you can tell them apart. If you see a pair of owls, the larger one is going to be the female.
Now, some of us are noticing the drooping wing. You know, owls don't always look both ways when they cross roads, and sometimes they get hit. The lucky ones get rescued, as this one was, and he was brought to a wildlife rehabilitator in New Hampshire. And they tried to correct the wing, but it just didn't heal correctly, so he can't fly. But his girlfriend can't fly either.
Yeah.
And Mark has made them handicap ramps to get up and down.
So they live outdoors in big aviaries. And the girlfriend is going to turn 20 in March. We don't know how old he is, but we suspect he's 3 or 4.
But she doesn't care. It doesn't make any difference to her.
Yeah. So this owl eats some bigger prey than a screech owl. They'll take flying squirrels, snakes, frogs. Could take a screech owl. They'll take salamanders, earthworms, insects,
Chipmunks.
chipmunks.
Sure.
Do we have any what? Things to feed them? Well, when we go home, they'll get a mouse.
Yeah, their supper is warming up on the furnace at home.
Yeah, we thaw the mice on the
Who wants to eat a cold
furnace.
mouse? No.
But sometimes, if we forget to thaw the mice and we go home and they're all frozen, we just pop them into the microwave.
Their own microwave now.
Yeah, we just warm them up in the micro.
Wasn't always the case.
Yeah. You don't want to overcook them. I'll leave it at that. But yeah, don't overcook a mouse.
Any questions as we're moving along?
Yes. What's the average lifespan of a barred owl? Well, it depends on whether they're in the wild or in captivity. So in captivity, I think they can live into their 20s, maybe even 30s. In the wild, I would suspect it's like 10 to 15 years. So they live longer in captivity when they're off, they get their food, they get their health care, they get housing, and their health care sometimes feels better than my health care, So they live a pretty good life. Yes, Alexandra.
Do all owls have eyes in the front of their head because they're predators?
I would say yes. I'd say that's a good way to tell. Although hawks and eagles' eyes are more to the sides, so not all predatory birds have them on the front, but all owls do. Yeah. Another pellet?
Now, for those of you who have taken apart owl pellets, they were probably barn owl pellets that were purchased and sterilized for you before you bought them or before whoever bought them. And they were this shape, but maybe a little bit bigger.
What she's doing there?
Yeah. Well, let's greet her.
She's getting to know you.
Yeah. She's rocking out. Yeah, she's actually moving her ears back and forth, getting to know the room. Owls are very perceptive.
And you thought people invented disco.
What, is she stuck in the 70s?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
But barn owls are one of the most beautiful of owls, and she would love to fly around the room. But barn owls don't hoot, they hiss. They go, shh. Try that.
Or they also screech and scream, which we don't need to imitate. And this is one of the few owls you can tell the gender of easily. So if you look at her chest, you see that it's some gold color with dark spots. Only the girls, the females, have that gold color. If this was a male, the chest would be white with dark spots. So it's one of the few owls you can easily tell male from female. This owl is found around the world on every continent except Antarctica. And they tend to be in warmer climates. So here in Massachusetts, they're not really found too often in the northern part of the state. So here in Wellesley, you're not likely to see a barn owl. If you get out to Martha's Vineyard or Nantucket, you're more likely to see one out there where they do nest. But even there, they're not common. But as you go south, they get more common. So down in Florida or Texas or California, there's lots of them. And then last July, I was out in Napa, California, hanging out in a vineyard. Not because I was looking at the grapes, I was looking at barn owls living in the vineyard. So a lot of farmers out there, vineyard owners, are putting up owl boxes to control rodents without pesticides. So there's hundreds of owl boxes in Napa Valley, and hundreds of families of barn owls eating mice and gophers. So the next time you have your wine, you can thank the barn owl, perhaps in part, for that nice glass of wine.
Yeah, it's a whole lot better than putting out rodent poison that would in turn poison whoever eats them. Question? Oh, yes, we have one question. What's your question? Why are they called the barn owl? Well, they do live in barns sometimes, but long before there were barns, they would live in tree hollows, or they would live in caves or underneath cliffs, in crevices. So they like to be in dark kind of holes or crevices. But they will nest in a barn sometime, especially out west and in the Midwest.
Or old mine shafts.
Yeah.
Is an owl's best sense its hearing? I'd say with the barn owl, probably so. They have some of the best hearing of any owl overall. And you notice the owl's eyes, the barn owl's eyes are kind of small compared to some of the other owls who have bigger eyes. So I would say this owl relies more on hearing and less on eyesight for a lot of its hunting. And if you blindfolded this owl, which they have done in experiments, they can catch their prey just on hearing alone. And likewise, if you plug up the ears and just have them using their eyesight, they can also catch their prey with eyesight. But with smaller eyes, perhaps it's not as good as maybe the barred owl, the great horned owl. Question here.
Why is there different poop?
Why is there different poop? Well, big owls do big poop and little owls do little poop. Yeah. Yeah. That's a good question.
They want to know these.
Question here.
How old are they when they have like eggs?
How old to lay eggs? They can lay eggs when they're 1 year old.
What?
Yeah. Yep. So
That's pretty amazing, huh?
it is. Yeah. Actually, they're full grown when they're about 6 or 7 weeks old. So imagine if you were full grown when you were 6 weeks old. That would be pretty amazing.
Yeah. This is
So
a beautiful great horned owl, and the great horned owl is sometimes called the tiger of the woods. They have tiger-like markings, and they have what we call horns. But of course, are they bony horns? No. And are they ears? No.
sometimes
they're
called
feathers.
ears, but they're not actually doing any hearing.
Right.
Yeah.
And the great horned owl has a four-note voice that I started off with. So why don't we all practice this? I'm going to divide you right down in the middle. You back there can decide which side you're on. Why don't we have this side of the room do the low call, which I'll teach you. And sometimes they have different pitches. So over here you can be the high call. So over here, low call. Go ahead. Okay, and maybe back in the woods or back in the park next door, you might hear a higher one. Go ahead. And then maybe the lower one might answer back.
Nice.
All right.
And this is the month. February is the month when they lay their eggs. So they're the first bird to nest in New England. They lay their eggs usually around mid-February. And, we might get a blizzard. And you can picture these female owls incubating their eggs with 2 feet of snow on their back. Because they're not going to leave those eggs uncovered and have them ruined by the snow. So they're very attached to the nest. The female doesn't leave. The male brings in food while she's incubating. And if he's a little slow bringing it in, she'll let him know. She'll complain. She'll food beg. And you can hear that drifting for, a quarter mile through the woods sometimes, a food-begging female. It's like, get over here and feed me. Yeah. So this owl was in his nest outside of Boston in the Blue Hills, and when he was 3 or 4 weeks old, he fell out of his nest. And that might have been an 80 or 90 foot fall. And when he hit the ground, he broke his right wing. Now, normally that's the end of the story. He would have died. But since this is a lucky owl, he was found by a forest ranger who brought him to the Blue Hills Trailside Museum in Milton, and they splinted that right wing, and it healed. This bird can fly. But when they gave the bird a flight test, he didn't pass. He can fly, but he's not a perfect flyer. And you have to be a perfect flyer to be released back to the wild, otherwise you potentially starve. So that's why we have him. And he's how old now, Marcia?
He's almost 11. We don't know exactly when he hatched.
And you might notice he's closing his left eye as well. His upper eyelid stopped working a few years ago. He went to the eye doctors. We don't really know what's going on. The eye doctor didn't know. But perhaps when he fell out of his nest, he might have bonked his head, and it might have caused some neurological damage. And so when he needs to close his left eye, he brings the lower eyelid up, because his upper eyelid is kind of stuck in the up position. This owl can take some larger prey. They can take skunks, which is actually quite a favored meal for them. But it's not a big deal because they can't smell. And they will take prey that they can't even lift. Like sometimes they'll take down a raccoon or a possum that they can't lift, but they'll sit there for several days and eat from it. And they will sometimes take small cats and dogs.
In fact, just an aside, most birds cannot smell. With the exception of turkey vultures, they have to be able to smell rotting flesh and dead things because they're the cleanup crew. And certain types of seabirds like albatrosses and petrels have to be able to smell fish oils at sea.
Okay.
Yeah, just missed my foot. Any other questions? Yes. All the owls are enclosed with solid front boxes except for the snowy, yes. And we've been doing this now for 25 years, and this particular snowy, just would not tolerate a solid front. He'd be jumping up after it. And with the open front, since he's been raised by people, he feels most comfortable if he sees people or can see out. Plus, snowy owls are a diurnal bird of prey. That is, they hunt during the daytime. They're not nocturnal like the rest of the owls. So I think it's also because he likes to see the daylight. Of course, they can see at night, too.
Any other comments or questions? Yes?
How does an owl's wings help it catch prey?
How does an owl's wings help it catch prey? Well, when it flies, it doesn't make any noise. So its wings have special feathers that allow it to fly silently. And that's a good thing for sneaking up on prey, like mice and other rabbits and small animals. So they don't make any noise. So that's primarily, the wings help them fly quietly, which is pretty handy. Now this last owl that you've all been kind of peeking at here is the snowy owl. And it's an impressive looking owl as well as an impressive flying owl. They can fly 65 miles an hour or more. So it's our fastest owl. And this bird is present here in New England right now. The snowy owls, you can see them in the wild. And they're just an amazing looking owl. This one we've had for just over
Almost a year and a half.
Almost a year and a half. And this one was captive hatched and imprinted on people. But you'll notice his wings are kind of pointed compared to other owls, hence the fast flight. And here in New England, they start to show up in usually late October or early November. They come down from the Arctic tundra, and then they stay the winter, and then they leave usually in late March or April. and head back to the Arctic to breed.
And they're usually silent when they're here in the wintertime, but once they get back up into the Arctic, and our bird, once the breeding season really begins in, say, April or May, he'll start hooting, except it's kind of a rough woofing sound. He goes, woo, woo. Try that. Woo, yeah. Woo, woo. He says, okay. Yeah. Says, okay, let the breeding season start.
So they're one of the only owl that I know of that has feathers on the bottoms of its feet. You can see he's really got well-feathered feet. Now in the summer in the Arctic, they're eating mostly rodents called lemmings. But here in the winter in New England, they eat a lot of ducks and gulls, as well as other birds. Now, one of the places they tend to congregate in Massachusetts, oddly enough, is Logan Airport in Boston. So if you're flying out of Logan in the winter, get a window seat, and I have more than once seen snowy owls sitting right by the runway in Boston as we're coming out of Boston. Think about it. The Logan Airport is flat and windy, like the Arctic. It's right next to the ocean where there's lots to eat, ducks and gulls. There's not a lot of disturbance there other than maybe noisy. It's noisy for sure. But it's an ideal place for these owls to hang out. Now, unfortunately, airplanes and big birds don't get along, right? You don't want big birds flying around an airport because they could get sucked into a jet engine or bounce off the jet. So there's someone that traps them at Logan and removes them. And this year, he's trapped more than 25 snowy owls at Logan Airport. He releases them up at Plum Island or down at Duxbury Beach. And those are both good places to go see snowy owls. Question here.
Do they eat bulls?
They sure do. Yeah, it's one of their favorite foods.
How long do their wings get?
He's about a 4-foot wingspan. A big female might be 4.5 feet. So of course a wingspan is tip to tip. Yeah.
Mark, we have a question here.
Okay, you can
What's your
take it.
question? Why are some owls big and some owls small? Well, it's kind of like some fish are big and some fish are small.
Some animals are big, some are small.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different kinds of animals in the world, and they're all different. They come in all different sizes.
Yep.
Yep.
And we have a tiny spot of whitewash. You might expect him to do a lot, but no, he's very reserved. Question you again right there. Good luck. How old is he? He's a year and a half old, a little bit older than that, and hopefully he'll live with us into his teens or 20s. Question, young lady, right there. Good luck. What's he doing with his throat? He's panting. Snowy owls have the thickest, most densely packed feathers of any of the owls. Really densely packed, not fluffy there on his head. And so they're prone to overheating, and that's why we have the door cracked over there and the fan running. And needless to say, when it's snowing, he loves that kind of weather, and he stands in the snow and eats the snow. They all do. Yeah, sure. When the water's frozen, they eat snow. But yeah. So.
Question right in front of you, Marcia.
How can you tell if it's a girl or a boy?
With snowy owls, it's tricky. We know this is a male based on a blood test, but in the wild, it's really tricky. The bird books say a pure white owl is a male, but that's not always true. A friend of ours years ago was breeding snowy owls, and she had a very dark barred female in with a pure white male. And for 20 years, those two birds were together and they never had babies. And then, unfortunately, the pure white male was passed away when West Nile virus swept through the area. The bird succumbed to it. And she had a necropsy done on the bird, and the pure white male turned out to be a pure white female. So she had two females together for 20 years. So even though the bird books say a pure white male is a male snowy owl, pure white bird, it's not always true. And so if someone says to you with great authority, oh, that's a male, well, you can say, well, how do you know? Did you do a DNA test? And you'll have them, and whether they realize it or not. So it's pretty tricky.
Now, Mark,
We just called.
that was his woof. Mark specializes in flight shots of birds in general, owls specifically, and so all of these photos over here are taken by him.
So check out the Owl Gallery.
Yep.
They are available for purchase. All proceeds go to the Mouse Fund.
And what about your book?
And I've got an owl book coming out in a year. It's at the publisher now. And if you're interested in getting a personal notification when the book is out, you can sign up here with your name and email address, and I'll send you a personal email when the book is out. But please do come up and check the gallery, even if you're not going to purchase one. There's lots of interesting things to see here in these pictures. And I hope you all get to see or hear an owl pretty soon in the wild. And I'm going to end up with one last question right here.
I already have a book about birds.
Oh, okay.
Book
He
about
has one book,
birds.
but you can always get another book. Yeah, that's what a library's good for,
Yeah,
right?
once you start getting interested in birds, that's it. You'll be interested in birds forever.
Question. Why don't we take one there?
I'm just interested in, like you said, they're good men because this bird likes people. Do they ever favor people? Like, or they just...
Individual birds can, yes. We have a great horned owl that's 24 years old, that's totally imprinted,
He
and
favors Marcia.
favors me, kind of flies at him. Although that's kind of changing as he gets older, he's losing his
He's
eyesight.
mellowing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Are owls territorial?
Yes, they are territorial. In fact, occasionally they can be a little aggressive near a nest. So there was a woman at one of our programs that told a story. She was riding her bike in Weston on the bike path, and she got hit from behind by a great horned owl, and it knocked her helmet off. So she must have been near the nest with babies. That's rare, but they can be aggressive. Snowy owls in particular, up in the Arctic, can be very aggressive. We've had males dive at us near nests. We were up in Alaska studying them. And we saw this gentleman walking his dog on this road through the tundra, and up behind them came this snowy owl, and he just swept in low and he nailed that dog right in the rump, and the dog never knew what hit him.
Just bonked.
Yeah. So they can be aggressive, yeah, but it's rare around here.
How does the snowy owl manage to come all the way here?
Well, we flew him here. We bought him an airline ticket, and he came here. We adopted him from overseas. So we paid for his passage, and then he had to go into quarantine for a month before we could bring him out to the public. So that's how we got here, airlines, yeah.
What was the owl that did the disco thingy called again?
That's the barn owl. Yeah, barn owl, B-A-R-N. Your question?
What does the baby owls call?
Well, the baby owls, when they're begging for food, they can sound like what? Or shh.
Yeah.
Kind of a screechy begging
A
sound.
begging sound.
Yeah. Yes.
Average number of eggs that an owl will lay?
Is there an average number of eggs that an owl will lay? Well, there's no average for all the owls, but if you go with each kind of owl, yeah, there is an average. So great horned owl probably averages 2 or 3. Snowy owl varies more. When there's lots of food around, they'll lay a lot of eggs. If there's very little food around, they may not lay any eggs, or only a few.
And is that just once a year, or is it?
Once a year. Most owls, the exception is barn owl can breed up to 3 times a year. So they might have 3 families, and they can have up to 9 or 10 eggs each time. So 10 times 3, they could have 30 babies in a year. Yeah. All right, I'll take a couple more, and then we'll...
Are any of these birds, owls extincting?
Owls have gone extinct. None of these are endangered, But in New Zealand, the owl that went extinct was called the laughing owl. And it went extinct about a little over 100 years ago because rats, which weren't native to New Zealand, arrived on ships. And the owl nested on the ground, and the rats would come in and kill the babies or eat the eggs. And so the rats made that owl go extinct. And the only reason the rats were there was because Europeans arrived in ships with rats on them. Yeah, and there have been a few other owls that have probably gone extinct. There haven't been too many, although there's a lot of endangered owls right now. Yeah. Question back there. Yes? We do sometimes clip their talons.
How often do you do that?
It varies. Some hardly ever need it. Some need it like once or twice a year.
And we also trim their beaks, and that gets really interesting.
I use a Dremel tool to shape the beak.
I hold the bird.
Yeah, it vibrates them, but it doesn't hurt them. Yes?
Where do the snowy owls
Diamond.
go in the summer?
So, I'm sorry, say it again.
Where do the snowy owls go in the summer?
Where do the snowy owls go in the summer? They go back to the far north, up to the Canadian Arctic, or the Alaskan Arctic, or the Russian Arctic. So far north of here is where they spend their summers, on the tundra.
And the sun doesn't set above
Yeah,
the Arctic
24-hour
Circle.
sunlight.
Yep,
Wouldn't that be nice, huh?
it is nice.
Yeah, question there.
Wild are owls more active or more
In the wild, are owls more
active or calm?
active or calm? Both. They can be more active and more calm. Certainly this one could fight off an intruder into its territory. And in fact, the gentleman that traps the snowy owls at Logan Airport has a picture of a snowy owl eating another snowy owl.
What the?
Yeah. So,
If they're hungry enough, they will.
yeah, question here.
What do laughing owls sound like?
Nobody knows, because nobody could record their call back then. There were no recording devices, and nobody really knows what they sound like. One can only guess. What do you think they might sound like? What would a laughing owl sound like to you?
I don't know.
You can think about it. You can think about it.
When the snowy owl pants, why does its neck go out panting?
You mean like this? Yeah, he's panting because he's hot.
Is it possible to replicate the DNA and recreate one?
I think you could do it for your PhD project, your thesis. Theoretically, yes. I mean, there's talk of recreating extinct species like mastodons or mammoths. No one's done it yet, but there's talk about it. Or passenger pigeon is the other one they've talked about. Tasmanian tiger?
Dodo birds.
Yeah. See, she's thinking about it. I think she's going to be the one that does it. Yeah, it would be some big hurdles to do it, but scientists think it's possible. But it raises a lot of ethical issues too.
Would it be allowed to create a different kind of owl by like mixing their DNAs? Because you can mix apple tree roots and make a different kind of apple, can't you?
Well, I think in the future that is also going to happen, and I think that raises huge ethical questions. Yeah, because they talk about people designing their own animals in the future, and that could cause a lot of unintended consequences.
We could name it Alexandra.
I could name the owl Alexandra. Yeah, I'm sure we could. Yeah.
Well, I hope you all have a safe trip back. I think it's probably slippery out. Thank you all for coming out in this dubious weather. And what are you going to do if you hear an owl? Move back.
We'll all wait to see what Alexandra discovers on her PhD thesis.